Okay, this is a demo for the first demo for the Google Books accessioning work cycle that the infrastructure team is working on, that has been working on starting in 2020. We'll be working on it for the next few months. Just as a quick overview, the goal of this work cycle is to write the code that will enable us to download the approximately 3 million books that are Stanford's books that have been sent to Google for digitization and that Google has digital copies of, both images of the pages and OCR of the text. And so what we'd like to do is download each of those books and accession it into SDR. Now, because there are so many, we expect this process will take a fair bit of time. And so what we're doing is building a pipeline that will be able to run in the background and continue to pull books from Google without placing any significant impediments to other ongoing operations of SDR or any other component of our system. So what you're seeing here is a high-level overview of what we're building. This represents Google's systems, which have an API that allow us to query, to discover what books are available, to request a book for processing, and to download a book. And so we've built a client called a Grin client. This is like Google return interface, I think. And so this enables us to communicate easily with Google's API. This Google Books application is actually a small web-based application that we are writing, which will facilitate the various interactions with Google and our other systems and provide an admin interface view of what's happening. So basically a status update that can be monitored by a non-engineer as the process goes on. So, and then of course we have SDR off one end and a directory where we can store the files temporarily. So the way this works basically is we have some automated background tasks that are working with Google's API to discover books that are available, to request them to download, and to download them. We, in batches, we put them in a temporary download directory. Meanwhile, we utilize an API to go fetch the metadata for the book. We get a barcode back from Google, so we have to fetch our own metadata from our catalog. Then we utilize something else that we're building right now, which is an SDR deposit API, so that we can take the book that we've downloaded, take the metadata that we fetched from our own catalog, and then pass it to a new API that we're developing that will deposit this book into SDR. That's a very high-level overview of what we're working on. Basically, this side over here and this bit over here. So having given that overview, what we're looking at here is actually a Google Books GitHub project, which we started. And this essentially holds this part of the pipeline. It holds the Google Books web application, which I'll show you in a minute. It does not have this SDR API, which is separate, but it's this process is that the process I talked about is basically described here. These are some example rake tasks. A rake task is just a simple wrapper around some Ruby code that is executable on a schedule as needed. So we can do things, for example, like discover the available books, ask for books to be converted, ask for books to be downloaded, decrypted, and so on. So we have those bits of code written already. And then we have some sample scripts here, which can actually wrap a number of these things in process. For example, an example here, this is a barcode, and we have a rake task that we can pass that says download this particular book from Google, and then we have another kind of wrapper around code that consumes the SDR deposit API and basically says deposit this barcode, and here is the content. And so this will actually make an API call to our own internal API to deposit this content into into SDR. This is a description of the flow and so on. So that's a very high-level overview of what we've been working on these first few weeks, and we've made progress that we've able to we've been able to download a number of books and deposit them into SDR using our our new deposit API. Now, of course, there are a number of complications around how do we properly assign access rights to these books, which requires parsing of the metadata. And there's a number of, there's still quite a bit of work to be done in making sure that the object that is deposited looks the way it should and behaves the way it should. So while we have essentially done a proof of concept of the entire flow through the system, there's going to be a lot of iterations on making sure that this flow works as expected. So that's a lot of the work that's still to come. The other thing I can show you here is this is the Google Books app I was just describing. This is the front end for it. So of course, as I just showed you on that diagram, a lot of the processing is going to be essentially back-end infrastructure processing. This is a long-running pipeline that will be running for months, if not years, to download these 3 million books. And as such, we really wanted a way of easily having a view into how this process is going. And so that's why this app is really just essentially a simple status view of what's happening. For example, how the average rate per day, the average of conversion on the Google side, of download, and of our own deposit. So obviously this is just test data here, so there's not much data yet. And then how many books have gone through the system. You can see when I'm looking at it right now, so far we've had 6 that have succeeded in our tests and a few that have failed. A few that have failed download. In other words, we weren't able to get them from Google. We've had some issues looking up in our own catalog for various reasons, and still a lot to go here in the ready column. But this gives you a flavor of the statistics that we're going to be getting out, and then of course we'll have some views on the various errors that have occurred, so that later on we can go back and try and understand the reason for these processing errors. So this is a high-level overview of what's been going on with the Google Books side of the Workcycle. And as a reminder, this Workcycle is not just in building this Google Books pipeline. There's also 2 other pieces of work going on, which I'm not really going to talk about very much in this video. One is SDR evolution, which involves some core infrastructure work to move ourselves forward in our infrastructure in areas like providing APIs. The SDR API is the SDR deposit API is a good example of that work. It happens to also support Google Books. There's also work in trying to further isolate Fedora in our system to facilitate its replacement in the future. So there's a number of other projects going on that are not projects necessarily, but pieces of work going on in SDR evolution. And then there's also some work going on to migrate storage space used by preservation from some older hardware that is going away because of lack of support. So we need to migrate a lot of content on disk and preservation core, and there's work going on to both support and facilitate that, which I'm not talking about in this video as well. So the entire infrastructure team has been involved in this. Myself and Andrew Berger are the product owners, and thanks for listening.